Hello, we will start very shortly, but we just want to see if anybody else wants to join first. Okay, then I think we're good to go. Before we start the webinar, I would just like to go through some technicalities. The webinar will be recorded, and you will get the recordings after the webinar on your email. And also, we will have a short Q&A after the webinar is over, or at the last part of the webinar. And if you have any other questions, just contact us at info@CEMAsys.com. And also, you won't be able to interact during the webinar, but so your camera and your microphone will be turned off. Okay, today I'm very happy to welcome you all to this webinar on flag emissions accounting and target setting. We have an interesting agenda planned for today with guest speakers from CDP, Midsona, and also some in-house expertise who will share their knowledge on the topic. My name is Katrina, and I am a sustainability consultant here at CEMAsys, and I will be the moderator of this webinar. And in case any of you don't know who CEMAsys are, I will start by just giving a short introduction before we dive into the exciting topic of today. CEMAsys is a consultancy firm located in Oslo, Boston, Copenhagen, and Stockholm. And as you can see on this slide, we are over 65 ESG expert consultants, 15 software developers, and in total over 100 employees across the world. CEMAsys was founded in 2007, and since then we have developed a robust ESG software solution, become a CDP accredited provider, and also a SBTi accredited partner. Our business evolves mainly around two things: our software solutions and also our expert consultants. Our software solution includes cloud-based applications following recognized standards and frameworks, which encompass all the spheres within sustainability, within environment, social, and governance. Our ESG consultants continuously strive to stay up to date and execute best practice and to guide our customers on a more sustainable path. And today we wanted to host a webinar on flag. Today's webinar is called The Journey to Flag Emissions Accounting and Target Setting. This is a journey that is quite new to most businesses. The forest, land, and agriculture sector is affected by the devastating consequences of climate change, but also represents a significant contributor to the problem, as it accounts for nearly 22% of the global GHG emissions. Additionally, the sector inhabits a great potential for reducing emissions globally. There are several reasons why we wanted to host this webinar today, but I just want to highlight three very important reasons. First of all, the new focus on flag can be seen as a game changer to the GHG emissions accounting as we know it today. Until now, these emissions from the sector have been partially excluded from the reporting, but this is now about to change. Second, the flag emissions accounting and target setting is complex, and companies will need to increase their efforts when it comes to data gathering and getting the data quality required, and also understanding the full scope of their emissions. And lastly, flag emissions accounting and target setting represents a key element when it comes to climate change mitigation efforts. The sector inhabits an important potential to contribute to mitigating emissions through carbon removals, cutting of deforestation, and improvements in land management practices. To talk to us about this important topic, I have the pleasure to welcome Amelia Tan from CDP, Siv Kjersti Rodal from Midsona, and my colleague and in-house flag expert, Agnes Tunstad. The first speaker of today is Amelia. She is Global Lead and Transition Accelerator at CDP and the expert on the topic of science-based targets. Her work focuses on supporting companies to commit and develop science-based emissions reduction targets through the Science-Based Targets Initiative, as well as collaborating with internal and external stakeholders to drive corporate climate leadership through disclosures and transition planning for climate and for nature. Today, Amelia will give an introduction to flag emissions with a focus on removals and data quality. Welcome, Amelia.
Thank you, Catherine. I just want to check you can see me on video.
Currently, we cannot.
Okay. Let me just turn off and on my video again. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there, but if you don't mind, I will just continue.
Yeah,
okay.
Please do.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the great introduction. I apologize for my video feed being a little, iffy at the moment. But yes, I sit in CDP's Transition Accelerator team. And this is us, I'm really glad to be here to support the webinar on this very important topic. Great. So today I will focus on a bit more on the flag sector target setting, diving a little deeper, covering a little bit more about data granularity, and a bit more on touching on removals as well, on what it looks like for greenhouse gas accounting as well as SBTi target setting. But before I do that, a little bit of background in case anyone's not familiar with the SBTi. So it was founded in 2015 amongst these founding organizations, including CDP and Women Business. And the focus was really to help companies off the back of Paris Agreement to be able to set emissions reduction targets that are aligned with the Paris Agreement. And as of late last year, the SBTi actually incorporated into its independent entity in the United Kingdom, and is in the process of becoming fully independent. So this is great because then it can help to scale the validation service that SBTi provides, and therefore bringing more companies into the fold to have these ambitious targets validated in accordance to science. So as Catherine mentioned earlier, before the flag guidance was available and before the FLU emissions accounting methods were developed by Greenhouse Gas Protocol, we weren't able to capture the land-based emissions in the overall global emissions profile. And this makes up 22% of global emissions. So it's really exciting for us to be able to capture these emissions and meaningfully reduce emissions from this sector, and also really trying to understand where the hotspots are and how we can target different areas of our value chain for companies and financial institutions as well, to understand where we can start to look into decarbonizing this sector. The SBTi flag validation also, requires companies to set a no deforestation commitment as well, which will help definitely help to reduce the impact from land use change. So when we look at flag targets, these are the specific activities that are covered, in this sector. So, if you look at the development of SBTi flag guidance, it was done in alongside with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol's land and removals guidance. So this helps to, address that 22% of emissions that I was talking about. At the same time, these three pockets of activity kind of define the three main categories of activities that produce emissions and where opportunities exist to remove them. I won't go too much into details here, but then, I want to also emphasize that these are activities specific to up to the farm gate. So companies that are setting flag targets will need to set this alongside the energy and industry targets as well. And the removal activities are really focused on improving agricultural practices, and in order to have more regenerative or practices that help to sequester more carbon and lock it into the carbon sinks, even with agriculture. So I will go a bit more into other aspects of the data quality and preparation in a bit. But before that, these are the target setting structures. As I mentioned, energy targets will be required to set in addition to flag targets. And for companies setting flag targets, there are two specific target setting methods, including the flag sector pathway, which actually translates to an absolute target for flag emissions, as well as the commodity intensity pathway, which are specific to 11 commodities and covering 26 different regions. So for the first time, companies are able to dictate or set targets based on the relevant emissions factors by commodity and by region. And I want to also do a slight mention that there is a current suspension of the timber and wood fiber pathway from 2 days ago, because there has been some feedback on the level of removals in this pathway being not quite reflective of what's happening in the sector. So the SBTi is re-evaluating this pathway and is hoping to reinstate this pathway in maybe later this year. But in the meantime, companies in the wood and timber fiber and wood fiber sector can use the other target setting methods to set their target. And I have placed a link on this slide. If you receive a copy of this slide deck, you can click on this. But otherwise, this is also available on the SBTi flag sector page as well. So in terms of data requests, right? One of the things that most companies don't realize is that, with the flag guidance available, all companies will actually have to report their flag emissions in their inventory when submitting targets, whether or not they're setting flag targets. This is because it will help the validation team to understand whether a company falls into the category of being required to set flag targets. So ideally, companies in the flag sector, as well as those with 20% or more of their emissions coming from flag sources, across all scopes, will need to set separate flag targets alongside their energy targets. And the data request asks for gross emissions for flag data. And if a company is setting a flag target, then you can set a flag target that covers your emissions as well as removals alongside your no deforestation commitment. And the data level of this aggregation, I will talk a bit more about that, but all of that data will be put into the flag annex form, which helps the validation team to understand what is the level of this aggregation of your emissions across different commodities, and how you separate your data between flag and non-flag emissions. If a company with flag emissions reported is not setting a flag target, it's optional. You can if you want to, which also allows you to use removals to account for part of your target achievement. But if a company has flag emissions but doesn't set a flag target, then you can include your flag emissions into your non-flag target. But if you do this, it means that your flag target, so your non-flag target, meaning your standard energy target achievement, cannot be accounted for with removals. So I hope that's clear. But I'm happy to take more questions about this, because I know I'm sure Catherine and the rest are experts at this as well. But this is just to give a snapshot of the data requests. So this is what a target formulation will look like. This is an example, for example, for companies with net zero as well as flag targets. So for both near-term and long-term target setting language, you will have separate energy as well as flag targets. So this is another snapshot of what are the available guidance and tools and forms that companies are expected to submit. And this is just to give you an idea of the available resources to help you understand how to go about, setting your flag targets, including the getting started guide, which has a very flag specific version that is included. But also, later in the slide deck, I will give you a bit of summary of what that looks like as well. So the next two slides are quite important, as they are quite new developments. So there is a version 1.1 of flag guidance that was released in the middle of last month. So this small update is really to help clarify some questions that companies have been sending the SBTi team, and to clarify anything that is unclear. So majority of the material is still the same, with the exception of these three areas of clarification, meaning the first one being target setting and achievement. So there has been a bit of confusion on what it means to achieve your flag target, because when you submit your data in the target setting tool for flag, you will see that there is a percentage target for emissions reduction as well as for removals. So for SBTi to see that you have achieved your targets once you have, get it validated, both your emissions reduction target as well as your removal targets will need to be met separately, concurrently. So if you have a lot of removals, that's great, but it cannot substitute the emissions reduction that is expected as well. And you also need to set, achieve your separate flag emissions across scopes 1 and 3. And if you have a commodity pathway that you have used in calculating your flag target, you will also need to meet the commodity sub-target as well. So this is to ensure, all of this is to ensure that, the carbon budget for the flag sector is conserved, and, companies will continue to focus on the areas where they are most, impactful in trying to reduce emissions. So the second one is on data granularity. So this is covered in the flag annex form, where, you can provide this data. And you can also look at section 3.1.6 of the guidance, which covers this data quality as well. So this is just to say that, the SBTi expects companies to be very clear in the disaggregation of your emissions across land versus versus land management emissions, and within land management emissions between CO2 and non-CO2, mainly nitrous oxide and methane emissions separately. And of course, your emissions and removals per commodity will also need to be separated as well. And in terms of commodity data, I think SBTi, recommends that companies always use the best available data to them. So the recommendation, if possible, is always to have, minimally regional data for scope 1 and country levels data for scope 3, or whichever is best available to the company. And last but not least, again, flag emissions needs to be accounted for by all companies, whether your flag targets are set or not. So this is just something to reiterate again. All right, so the next one. So later on the 20th of December, there were also a few key resources that are, published by SBTi. So the first one is a procedure for validation of SBTi targets. You will remember that previously there was the target validation protocol and corporate manual. So this new document is a combination of both, which helps to reduce the number of resources that companies need to refer to. And the second one is the SBTi criteria assessment indicator. So this is, it doesn't change the criteria per se, it just provides a bit more context and expectation from the validation team to companies who are submitting targets. So this criteria assessment and indicator file, you can see as like a Bible of target setting. So if you are preparing to set your targets, please make sure you go through this document as much as possible. And the second document needs to be best used alongside your target setting form. So this is the new target setting form that covers near-term target setting, near-term update target setting, as well as the net zero forms. So that it combines all of that Word documents into a tabbed Excel file. So it again eliminates the number of documents that you need to submit to SBTi. And if you're submitting flag targets, this corporate target submission form will still need to be submitted together with your flag target setting tool and the annex as well. To kind of give you a bit more deep dive or, more concise coverage on all these things, there has also been a video guide that was released last week, which I have linked here as well. Otherwise, you will see it also on the SBTi YouTube channel. Right, so very quickly, this is the resource that I mentioned earlier. If you have targets already, or if you haven't set targets, you may need to select the different type of target setting approach that is the most appropriate to you. So this slide covers, the kind of target setting pathway you are using, the pricing, which documents you have to submit, and what tools you have to submit as well. So I am happy to let the organizing team share this slide deck with you, so you can just click into the different links. And the last page here is also some useful resources, including links to the new documents I mentioned earlier. There is also a flag-specific mailing list you can sign up to as well if you want to stay up to date specifically for this sector. So thank you so much. I apologize again for my video not working, but yeah, I'll answer any questions in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Amelia. It was great to hear the perspective of the developer of the guidance. So that's very useful for us. Then it's time for our next speaker. This is my colleague, Agnes Tunstad. She is our in-house flag expert here at CEMAsys, with the responsibility of flag-related projects. She is part of our emissions factor team and work a lot with calculating emissions for our customers and also developing strategies for emissions reduction. Today, Agnes will explain how the new focus on flag emissions will change GHG emissions accounting, how to report on flag emissions, and also tips for target setting. Welcome, Agnes.
Thank you, Katrina. Let's see. Yeah. I'll start by briefly explaining some of the changes to greenhouse gas emissions accounting, since we've all gotten kind of used to the structure of GHG accounting with the 3 scopes and several categories of activities within those scopes. And now with the new flag guidance, we have some adaptations and additions to apply. And we have experienced that this can be somewhat disorienting in the beginning, how the new categories of emissions are included in the accounting and how to report onwards in the annual reports. So previously, the accounting has been structured by the scopes and activity categories alone. So as an example, if 1 kilogram of beef meat for retail sale has been added to the GHG emissions accounting, you've only entered the total amount of these emissions in scope 3 purchase goods and services. So the accounting alone has not distinguished the difference of, for example, methane emissions from enteric fermentation and the fossil emissions from processing, although both of those emission types may have been included. So with the addition of flag, we do separate in the accounting between those biogenic methane emissions from the cow and the fossil emissions from processing the meat, meaning that we, to a certain degree, add on the separation of gases and the origin of that gas to the accounting between fossil and biogenic and methane and carbon dioxide, for example. So the emissions from that 1 kilogram of beef is now separated into 2 accountings, and the total of those accountings become your full GHG emissions accounting. And another way to explain this is by looking at the emission factors that are used. So on the left, you can see that only 1 emission factor was used to calculate the emission results for rice previously. And that emission factor then included all the emissions related to this rice. But then on the right, you can see that we instead use 4 emission factors to calculate the emissions for RISE once we add on the flag accounting. And these figures that you see, they are fictional, and they do not state the actual emission factors for RISE, but they are representative such that it shows that for some commodities, a majority of the emissions will shift to the flag accounting. So RISE, in this example, has its majority of emissions in the flagged land management non-CO2 category due to the methane emissions in rice cultivation. And in some cases, all of the emissions outlined in the flag guidance has not previously been included. So it could also be an addition of emissions once you add on the flag accounting. And that all kind of depends on what has been included before. So this is why the new flag accounting also affects the previous consolidated GHG emissions accounting, because there are emissions that are now added or separated and put into the flag accounting to be targeted separately and with separate reduction measures. And since they are separately targeted, they also need to be publicly disclosed separately in, for example, the sustainability report. And if we look at some examples from different sectors in a very simplified way, we have first of the apparel company that sources textiles, which then gives them the addition of flag emissions in scope 3 purchase goods and services. So this company needs to dive into the emissions of all textiles that have land-related emissions, for example, leather or cotton, to calculate the flag emissions of these commodities, either using primary data or secondary data. Then we have a dairy producer who can have flag emissions in, for example, in scope 1, they could have enteric fermentation. And in scope 3, they could have flag emissions from the feed or the fertilizer production. And possible actions to reduce the flag emissions for this company could be to improve land use practices, to improve the feed content, or enhance productivity. And lastly, we have an aquaculture company. So flag does not apply to wild-caught fish, since that is not covered within the guidance, but a fish farming company will need to calculate flag emissions for their fish feed. So primarily companies will have their flag emissions either in scope 1 or in the purchase goods and services category in scope 3. But this can also vary depending on the company, and you should always start with a flag screening where we basically go through the flag related activities in your operations and value chain before moving on to do the actual accounting. So basically the new flag requirements, they increase the required GHG data and the accounting complexity. And it is expected that the alignment to the new accounting rules will be a journey over the coming years for all the involved actors. So secondary emission factor sources and tools will hopefully align and develop with this new guidance, as this becomes necessary whenever, and as often still is today, that primary data is unavailable. But as the mantra also goes, this primary data is the key to achieve accurate results of your accounting. So the primary data consists of measures from the actual place of origin and will provide the most granular and representative results. And it implies an engagement with your suppliers and your value chain actors to initiate this request and gathering of that primary data. So be remember when starting your journey with flag emissions that it may feel complex right now with all these new categories, but we need to start putting the puzzle together to get the final picture and view this as a journey towards achieving better insight into your value chain and GHG emissions. So our flag team here at CEMAsys has, together with our in-house tech team, developed a reporting solution to enable and facilitate the reporting of flag emissions in our SaaS solution. And we have assisted several companies with flag targets already, where the German textile company Tom Taylor is the most recent to have gotten their flag target approved by the SBTi. And we very much look forward to continue developing strategies together with companies on how to engage and reduce emissions within forest, land, and agriculture, as this is a very important part to reach the global 1.5 degree target. And to finish off, I'd like to say that some key considerations when moving forward with your flag accounting is to identify your primary areas of addressing flag, to ensure that you are transparent regarding your degree of alignment, and to simply start off by doing your best and continue to seek improvements in your accounting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnes. It was very interesting to learn more about how the reporting should be done, and also in terms of the data quality and breaking down the emissions and the main structural changes. So thank you so much for sharing. And our next speaker and the final speaker of today is Siv Kjersti Rodal. She is the CSO at Midsona, which is a European group and consumers good company within the sector food and beverage. Midsona are leading in the Nordic countries within organic products, consumer health and health food, with a vision to be one of the leaders in Europe. Midsona's mission is to help people to eat more sustainably and healthy, and is a forerunner in its work with sustainability. Siv Kjersti has a PhD and has experience in both research and business, and has for many years led the work in sustainability within the group. Today, she will share Midsona's experiences from starting to report their flag emissions, and also how they plan to use these flag targets going forward. So welcome, Siv Kjersti.
Thank you, Katrine, for a very nice introduction. I am very pleased to be here today to speak about Midsona's experience from starting to report on flag emission and how to use flag target going forward. Some short facts about Midsona. As Katrine said, we are a consumer goods company within the sector food and beverage. We develop, produce, and market products that help people to live a more healthy and sustainable life. That is our mission. We are core in organic and plant-based, and we have a very wide assortment. We have over 3,000 supply chain. The company is headquartered in Malmö, Sweden, and we have total sales of 3.9 billion. We have 830 employees in Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Germany, France, and Spain. From before, we have science-based targets approved by SBTi, but now we have updated and strengthened our climate targets. And in January, we submitted our net zero target to SBTi, where Midsona AB commits to SBTi to reach net zero GHG emission across the value chain by 2045. Part of this target, we have associated targets, including flag targets, which are submitted for approval to SBTi in January. After our screening, our own operation and value chain, the flag-related scope and category end up by purchased goods and services for Midsona. And that means that Midsona's targets for purchased goods and services are now splitted into energy and industry target and flag targets and deforestation target. For industry and energy target, we have made supplier engagement, where we commit that 70% of our suppliers by spend need to set their science-based target by 2028, and where we have ambition to gradually include all of them. For the long term, we want to reduce 90% by 2045. For the flag targets, we have committed that to reduce our flag emission by 30.3% by 2030, and for the long term, 72% by 2045. That needs to include both reduction and removals. And we have also a no deforestation target by 2025. So, sorry, I don't know what happened now. Okay. There we are back. So that means we are needed to split our emission data for purchase goods and services. Oh. I don't know what's going on, Katrine, but do you see my presentation?
Which slide did you want to? Is this one?
Yeah, this
Yeah,
one.
just let me know and then I can change for you.
Okay, perfect. So then we needed to split our emission data in these 4 different boxes, where we have the scope 3 emission, energy and industry emission. This is a non-land emission for purchase goods and services. Then we needed to look at the scope 3 flag emission, what we call LUC, that is land use change emission. In this part also we have the deforestation part. And we have also the scope 3 flag emission, land management emission. And then at the end, the flag removal or the carbon removals. The last part, we have not started to work with that yet, so the data is 0. But if you look at the column at the bottom of this slide, on the blue columns, you see all the total purchase goods and services data for Midsona for the base year 2022, where you see we are split it in 4 different columns and with different emissions. Okay, Katrine, the next. I want to say something about our calculations. I want to tell you about the complexity of the food industry, because when you're working in the food industry, it's maybe one of the most complex value chains. And Midsona, we have both what we call mono products, that means only products with one raw material, but we have also a huge amount of mixed products. That means we have products like you see one picture on the right side on this slide, where including different ingredients. And that is a challenge when you make flag emission. So if you see this product as example here, which is our Friggs chia and sea salt, this product has 4 different ingredients, but 98% of this ingredients are corn mix. So that means we made an approach where we needed to look at the most significant ingredients for also the more complex products. So that means for this product, we were looking at the land use change emission for corn. We look at the land management emission, and also the carbon removals are still 0 for Midsona. And then we needed to look at the energy industry emission with different processes, where we have, for instance, drying of corn, heating and grinding of corn cake production, and all these processes gave significant emissions. So that means on only the significant ingredient on a product like that, we had minimum 3 processing companies to reduce energy and industry emissions, and minimum 6 farmers to reduce flag emissions. And in some countries, we can have, even if you get the raw material from Asia, for instance, it can be much more farmers than that. So this shows the complexity. For this product, we need to work with 9 partners in the supply chain to reduce our emission. Katrine, the next slide, please. This is showing the results from our flag emission, where you see on the x-axis, you see the flag emission compared to the energy industry emission. So that is a very interesting slide, I think, because you see that, for instance, it is very easy to see that rice has both high energy and industry emission, but also very high flag emission. And on this slide, we can also see what kind of raw materials in our company having the absolute highest flag emission, and where we should put our highest efforts. Next slide, please. We have different challenges when we made our data. We have challenges with the mapping. It was complex with the knowledge in the industry, the availability of factors, and to have accuracy of the data. This low experience for wide assortment of products. We see that we have evolving frameworks going on. Midsona's wide product assortment made it very complex for us. We have 135 energy and industry categories and 150 flag categories. And as I told you before, around 3,000 supply chain. In the processing steps in the food industry, it's very pure data quality. And as I told you about, the complexity of mixed products was very challenging, where we needed to make the approach to look at the most important ingredient for a mixed product. But that means also we need to investigate in better data forward. And also the packaging was making it very even more complex to find a total emission data. So the overall learnings from this work has been that we need to accept data in accuracy of secondary sources and general uncertainty in frameworks and expectation for now. Okay, next slide, Katrine. So what about the further journey? What we call the flag roadmap, and which will be part of Midsona's climate transition plan. I have to highlight we are really in the beginning of this process. We submitted our targets to SBTi in 8th of January. But we are already starting to look at 3 potential steps for flag emission mitigation. One step is to make strategy for raw material or products with absolute highest emission to reduce land management emission. For instance, we can reduce purchases of raw materials produced by high use of pesticide and high carbon fertilizers. But that is examples of actions. It will be different actions based on the different raw materials. We can also include removals by planting trees in a strategy like that. Second, we need also to make a strategy to ensure no deforestation and reduce other land use change related raw material to reduce land use change emissions. And we have already worked with no deforestation strategy since 2 years now, and we have instructions in our company to be sure that we have no deforestation raw materials, but we need to work even more with that and work more with segregation and bigger control to avoid to purchase goods from vulnerable areas. And at the end, a very important part is the supply engagement for flag emission. We need to have that as a part of our supply engagement project because we have close to 3,000 supply chain, as I told you, where we don't have the direct control. And we need to ensure good partnerships and collaboration in the supply chain to be able to reduce our emission. And maybe the most crucial in a work like that, we need to be able to monitor this by good data platform. So to invest in better data management, will also be a big part of our job forward. Okay, Katrine, next slide. At the end of my presentation, I want to tell you about our flag process. We have this project was based on 7 steps. We started our job in the spring 2023. In step 1, we made a screening of Midsona scope 1 and 3 for potential areas for flag emission. In step 2, we define actual categories where we end by, and we find that was product and services, and we split the emission into energy industry emission and flag emission. In step 3, which was the biggest part, we made the calculations based on the categories, for instance, rice, corns, etc., connected to the supplier and also connected country origin. And we tried to be most correct on the data based on the country origin to have most real data as possible. This was a very good teamwork between CEMAsys and Midsona, where we combined practical knowledge with theoretical approach. And it's absolutely the most the area where we were working hardest. This is really a huge area of the process. Then in step 4, we made a target setting using the SBTi tools and also made the acceptance by the steering group and management team in Midsona. At step 5, we made a submission to SBTi that was now in January, 8th of January. And parallel to that, we have started to work on the strategic implications. That means to update Midsona's climate transition plan to include roadmap for flag target going forward. And in May 2024, we expect approval by SBTi. And then we will finalize our climate transition plan, including flag, and also get this approved by the board. So that is our process. So then, okay, next slide, Kata.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Siv Kjersti. It was very interesting to hear about your process and how you have gone about setting the targets and how you will continue to meet them going forward. So yeah, that was very, very interesting. And for the last couple of minutes at the end of this webinar, I would just take advantage of this opportunity while we have our expert here today. And I have some questions for you. So I think my first question will be to Amelia. If you are ready, Amelia, I can just, start.
Yes, everything's okay, I hope.
Great. So if my company is not required to set a flag science-based target, but has some flag emissions, where should those emissions be included in the target setting?
So this is a great question. Before you know whether you're expected to set flag targets, just make sure you check the proportion of your flag emissions first, because even if you're not in the flag sector, but you have 20% or more of your overall inventory coming from flag activities, you will be expected to set a flag target. So in the case that you do have flag emissions, but you're not setting a flag target, you can include those emissions into your standard inventory across like scope 1, 2, and 3, mostly scope 1 and 3, and include that as part of your standard target setting inventory.
Okay, thank you. That's valuable. And the next question is also to you, Amelia. Why is the flag accounting separated from bioenergy accounting and target setting?
Yeah, so this is a very commonly asked question. The first reason is because the bioenergy criteria predates, flag guidance. So, the SBTi is going to try and update on a step-based basis. We also are looking at greenhouse gas protocol as for direction in how to account for these different biogenic emissions as well. But in the meantime, if you see companies that have energy and industry targets, you will see a footnote that says it includes, biogenic emissions and removals at the moment. So flag emissions and flag targets are more specific to flag activities, as I, mentioned in my presentation earlier. So we still have this differentiation until something changes from SBTi.
Perfect, thank you. And one last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the absolute reduction for a near-term target for flag less than for energy industrial near-term targets? That is 30.3% versus 42%.
Yes. So 30.3% and 42% is based off a 10-year period, looking at a 10-year period, right? So per year is 3.03 versus 4.2. So the 4.2% is mainly looking at global emissions across the energy/industry sector, and not really looking at flag sector. Whereas the flag target is very specific to this sector only. And generally speaking, there is also an acceptance in the reality that the FLU or flag sector is slower to decarbonize because of the continuous emissions of methane and nitrous oxide in agriculture. So that's why the emissions reduction is slightly lower than the energy targets.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And also, as I said earlier, we will send your presentation to every attendee, so they will also be able to click on the links for the guidance and read more. So that's very good. Thank you. And then, Siv Kjersti, I have some questions for you as well. First of all, as you mentioned, you need to engage the supply chain. You have a very huge supply chain. So my first question is, how do you plan to work with your suppliers going forward to implement the reduction measures needed?
First of all, I need to highlight again that we are just starting to work with this strategy. But what is very important is to elaborate a good strategy and transition plan in a good manner, so that we have the right level and details. But what is excessively important is to have this integrated as a part of the sourcing ambition. We need also to work to provide our data structures together with suppliers to input the data. We have already started the job with the supply engagement for the industry and energy emission. And we see that we need to include the flag emission in this project. So that means we will work with our suppliers on both the targets in the same project, because it's really important with the supplier engagement. And also I told you that we are beginning the process to look at where we have on the raw material, where we need a strategy for the absolute highest emission. We also need to work with our biggest suppliers for these raw materials. And we are also already working with the suppliers concerning more control and certification of deforestation risk raw materials. So that is my answer to that.
Yeah, thank you. And also you touched upon the things you have learned through the process up until now. But I just am curious if you can mention the three most important things that you have learned from the process until now.
We know that we were working in a very complex value chain, but we have really understood even more the complexity in the industry and the need for cooperation and partnerships in the supply chain. That will be crucial to be able to reach these targets and to work with the flag. We also saw that, this is giving us a huge database. So the data management and improving data management, always improving data management, it's also crucial. So that was also, we know that from before, but we see it even more after our calculations. And third, we need to be able to learn and improve along the way, because this is very new for all of us and for everyone. So we don't have all the answers in the beginning. I think that is maybe the most important of learnings.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you so much. I think we have time for just one last question. That is to you, Agnes. I would like to ask you, what are the main advantages of setting flag targets?
Well, yeah. I would firstly say, as we say at CEMAsys, that what you measure, you can manage, basically. So the more knowledge you have about your emissions, the more you are able to affect them, basically. So the new guidance basically targets emissions that previously has been excluded from the target boundary and the measures. So by following the new guidance, you will be provided with tools on how to manage this portion of emissions that has been left out previously, basically. So that also gives you the possibility to take account for those emissions and increase your transparency outwards, which is also beneficial from a marketing perspective also, as more focus is being put on companies taking responsibility. So it's basically following this pathway gives you the tools to make improvements in your accounting of these emissions.
Yeah, thank you. That is what we had time for today. But before we close off, I just want to say thank you to the participants for joining, or our speakers. Thank you so much, Steve, Kjersti, Amelie, and Agnes. It has been very interesting to hear what you had to say. And it is no doubt that this topic will be even more important going forward. So that you have been here today and shed some light on how to start the journey is very valuable. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that it has been super educative. So thank you so much for sharing. And also thank you to the participants of the webinar. And I wish you all a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.